Hello and welcome to the Telegraph Studios. I'm Rachel Downey and today we're going to be discussing how innovation in agriculture supports food security. I'm going to be talking to Aidan Connolly, Chief Innovation Officer at Alltech. Hello Aidan.
Hello.
Aidan, 5 years ago, no one even spoke about agriculture. Nowadays, I do this, I go in the supermarket, I look at ingredients on everything, my friends do. What's changed?
Rachel, I have to agree with you. I think that agriculture has seen people are much more interested in where their food comes from, and the impact of that's had on agriculture has put agriculture front and centre in everybody's discussions and everybody's debates. I think there are three probably primary reasons for that. Food prices have gone up. That has had some political implications, maybe even the Arab Spring. I think that we've seen also tremendous interest in food safety and food sustainability. Food safety perhaps specifically places like China, but food sustainability all over the world. And finally, agriculture is embracing some really novel technologies, even things like drones, in a way that suggests that we will see some big improvements in productivity over the next few years.
We all understand the gravity of this, so what are we going to do about it?
In terms of what we're doing in agriculture, we have a gap of about 30% between what we actually achieve in performance, in productivity in the field, and what we could be achieving given the genetic abilities of those plants and animals to produce food. I think it's going to be very important to use new technologies, such as ones that Alltech is using in 129 countries all over the world. We're engaged in a conversation with many people, many stakeholders about how these technologies can be used. And it's important to see that these technologies are natural and sustainable, which of course fits very closely with what the consumer is looking for.
Well, the UN has said by 2050 there'll be between 9 and 10 billion people that require 70% more food than what we can produce. Can we achieve this?
Yes, we can, absolutely. I think we've shown in the past that through the growth and through the improvements in productivity, that we can actually achieve 1.7% more food each year from wheat fields, from corn, and from the production of meat, milk and eggs. 1.7 doesn't sound like a lot, but multiplied or compounded out over 35 years, that actually would achieve the 70% we're talking about. So I think that as we see new technologies coming into agriculture, as we see people doing things more sustainably, we actually will be able to achieve that 70% goal.
Well, okay, we all want to achieve it, so let's do a thought experiment. What happens if we don't address sustainability in agriculture? Will this affect rich countries, third world countries?
Sustainability is something that perhaps we see being imposed on us. I know farmers often say, well, why do we have these new rules? But actually sustainability is something which, when you embrace it, can be very positive and often brings you to new solutions which are better than the ones you found before. Of course, there's a certain amount of pain associated with change. Nobody likes change. But I think sustainability is not just a challenge which is very exciting and very rewarding for the, let's call it, for the developed world, but also for the developing countries. By embracing those new technologies, you end up in a place which is more productive, indeed more profitable for them as well.
I believe you've published in this area, so what have you learned, and also whose responsibility is it?
Rather than trying to answer it myself, for one of the particular papers I wrote called Glimpse, I invited 50 experts from Harvard and different large food companies around the world to help me try to answer that question. And they gave me basically seven categories of answers that came under the acronym Glimpse. But the most important that I saw was that governments don't solve the problems on their own, but they can enable industry, farmers, the food industry in general, to produce more food. And by putting in place the right policies, the right strategies, the right infrastructure, I'm very, very positive about what agriculture can do to address that gap.
Well, you mentioned farmers and the need for the right infrastructure, policies. So do we have solutions for the worst case scenario?
I suppose when we see stories in the press referring to farming and agriculture, we often hear of these worst case scenarios. But actually today, the genetic potential of production for things like wheat and potatoes, tomatoes, eggs and milk is on average 30% above what we're actually achieving in the field. So that shows you the potential to produce more food is tremendous. And even if we don't achieve everything that we could, we're still going to end up with some very, very positive responses.
Why does the government seem to hesitate?
Governments, of course, are very influenced by voters. Voters like their food, not just to fill their bellies, but also to know the food is safe, that's produced in the right way, sustainably, that it's sourced from the right sources. So I think agriculture is a very sensitive subject for many, many governments. They want the food to be safe, they want it to be sustainable. But I think increasingly they are realizing that also it can be a very positive thing, very positive in terms of the ability to see how farmers can produce food that consumers want.
You mentioned there the safety, again sustainability, farmers needing to produce maybe more food. What can science and technology do?
Actually, I think that science and technology is doing a lot. I think scientists have done a tremendous job of introducing new technologies. What perhaps they haven't done very well is helped us to communicate to consumers why those choices, why those technologies are safe or consumer friendly. I hesitate to bring up the example of genetically modified organisms, and without addressing whether that's a good technology or maybe not a great technology, I just want to point out that that technology has not been communicated to consumers in the right way. They don't fully understand if the technology is safe. They don't feel comfortable with it in many, particularly of the developed countries. So I would feel communication has perhaps been the weakest part of what science and technology have been doing so far.
So how do you solve this communication problem?
In Alltech, we've learned to talk to everybody. We talk to food companies, we talk to seed companies, we talk to people involved in from supermarkets to the food chain in general, consumers. Everybody has an opinion on food and everybody can teach us something. And I think in particular, this 30% gap, the gap between what we achieve today and what we could achieve if we achieved the genetic capacity of plants and animals to produce food, in order to achieve that, that can be done quite easily, we feel in Alltech with the technologies we have, but it also involves critically communication with all levels of the food chain.
Are there any health risks, environmental risks with this?
I'm very, very positive about what science brings to the table, but this is another interesting area because, of course, I've had some opportunities to work with academics, and they asked me, could we try to look at what the food industry sees moving forward? So I'm in the process of doing that with 50 food companies, the largest food companies in the world, and asking them to give some insights into where they see food going in the future and what the possible risks are. Of course, the risks come from things like sourcing food. They go into the sustainability of food. It's very important to bring technologies that, of course, are safe, that are technologies that have been scientifically proven, and technologies which the governments have reviewed. I think we are very clear that there are important things we need to address. The risks are there, but those risks, I think, are being understood and are being addressed in advance of those occurring.
Recently, Alltech sponsored a symposium on agricultural success stories in Africa, and this received a huge amount of attention. Why?
I think Africa is a very exciting story, and certainly we got a lot of media stories, as you mentioned. I think Africa is something that in agriculture is very important. It has, of course, rain or water, it has land and it has sunshine, and it has them in abundance. And that makes it very important from the ability to produce crops, vegetables, of course, milk and meat, and something that perhaps we don't have to the same degree in the rest of the world. That symposium, we focused on success stories of farmers who are producing food for agriculture naturally and sustainably, efficiently. I think it's very interesting because Africa looks like it's not just going to be able to produce food for itself, but also to be able to produce food maybe for export to the rest of us.
Have you ever thought about taking the symposium idea out of Africa and putting it somewhere else in the world?
Actually, that is something we're going to do. In the month of May, we have our Revelation, it's called. It's suggesting that we're going to provide a lot of revolutionary new technologies and ideas at a symposium we're going to hold in Lexington, Kentucky in May. That'll be attended, we hope, by almost 5,000 people. Traditionally, we've had 3,000, but we're expecting a big increase. And many of the subjects that we've talked about just here today will be covered in that symposium. So that would be something I think you should all watch for and you should look for with interest. It's going to be a very exciting opportunity, perhaps even for some of your viewers to follow us on the internet through alltech.com and see some of the ideas we talked about here today.
Fantastic. Well, look, Aidan, thank you for joining us here today.
Very much appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.